Good Friday afternoon, everybody. I'm meteorologist Tim Pandages. Hurricane Ian, yes, a hurricane again. It re-strengthened after it moved off the coast of Florida yesterday afternoon. Higher end Category 1 storm at the moment, and it is in the process of making landfall in South Carolina. Its second U.S. landfall, third overall. Today is Friday, September the 30th, 2022. So as I mentioned, Ian regained that hurricane intensity. Winds right now, as of the 1 o'clock National Hurricane Center advisory, is up to 85 miles per hour, and that's where it has peaked for its second intensification period. The storm made landfall, and it's the second U.S. First, obviously, was Cayo Costa in Florida on the southwest coast, but it's third overall. Remember, it made its first landfall as a Category 3 storm in Cuba, western Cuba, earlier this week. Now we've got a new wave to chat about as well in the Atlantic. It has not been tagged as an investigative area yet, but it's got moderate chances of becoming our next named storm. That next name on the list, by the way, is Julia. I will tell you that it has no likelihood really of impact in the U.S. anytime soon, if in fact it does develop. All right, here's Ian. This is our main focus point here in the South Carolina coastline. Again, here are the stats, 85 mile per hour winds. It has picked up forward speed, which is good. It was crawling at 8-9 miles per hour as it moved across Florida. Now it's at 15, so nearly double that. But pressure continues to fall. The latest advisory here does drop it another 3 millibars, and typically the pressure drops first, and then we see the wind speeds come up, but it's running out of real estate to intensify. Warm waters are its fuel. It's in the process of moving over land. Landfall is defined as the center of, when it's a well-defined eye, or the center, pressure center, crosses over land. That apparently has not happened yet, according to the National Hurricane Center, but it is imminent in these areas here, likely between Charleston and Myrtle Beach in South Carolina. Now, I want to show you something very interesting here. The system itself looks nothing like it did when it was a major Category 4 storm, because it's got a lot more working against it. Dry air and wind shear, and we can see that dry air getting pulled down on the backside of this storm with this rust color here. That's very dry air in the mid-levels of the atmosphere, and that is making the southern loop behind the system and coming up on the eastern side. But also take note of the deep tropical moisture fetch that it has. This storm is raining out over the mid-Atlantic, but it's pulling its tropical moisture from the southern Caribbean and driving it all the way north, and then you see the outflow from the system extending all the way up into Nova Scotia. So a far-reaching storm here, but that dry air should help to cut things off as we go through the next 24 hours or so, but the storm itself will continue to rain itself out. All right, here's radar imagery. Here is the ragged center of Ian, and you can see it is literally moving over land at the recording of this video, so landfall occurring right around, say, 1, 2 o'clock local time here. There's Charleston, there's Myrtle Beach, right in the middle of that there. You're going to have the strongest of the winds onshore to the east, northeast of the center here for Ian. That means the storm surge risk is the greatest out by Myrtle Beach. In fact, I saw some numbers already putting the Myrtle Beach storm surge numbers, near record levels in some spots, or at least top 5 ever experienced in this area as it's piling the ocean up along the low-lying areas. On the backside to the west, Charleston area is seeing winds coming offshore, but very, very heavy rain here. This is 1, 2, 3 inch an hour rainfall rates in this tropical band on the western side of Ian. Here's a look at recent wind gusts. Charleston recording 68 mile per hour winds. A buoy that the center passing just nearly 67 miles per hour there, and even up into Lumberton seeing 51 miles per hour, the same at Florence, South Carolina. So very windy, and as we talked yesterday, that wind field is very, very large, extending over 300 miles from the center of Ian to the northeast. So I talked about the winds coming onshore. We've got those winds coming up, a 2 to 4 foot storm surge up into North Carolina. As you get down to Myrtle Beach, that's more like 4 to 7 feet potentially before all is said and done and the storm moves onshore and really starts to lose its steam. Now, something also to take note of here is the outer band stretching well to the north here, all the way up into Virginia, portions of Maryland and Delaware. When we get these outermost bands with tropical systems, they're a little bit better able to spin up some tornadoes, and a lot of times that's an overlooked risk. But there is a tornado watch for all of coastal North Carolina and southeastern Virginia until 10 o'clock tonight in those outermost bands. Once they encounter the friction of the land surface, it adds that spin to the air out there. We've already got the broad spin with a tropical system, but more micro-scale spins can easily spin up a tornado or two. So keep that in mind if you're in those areas, on top of the flooding threat you'll have to deal with throughout the day today. So the forecast track here does just take it due north. Once it's over land, it really loses that steam. By this evening, 60-mile-per-hour winds. It weakens further as it moves into interior North Carolina, even western North Carolina, down to a tropical depression. But the thing is, all of that tropical moisture coming in is butting up against the spine of the Appalachian Mountains. That forces it to rise, and it wrings out the atmosphere like a sponge, which is why we've got rainfall forecast totals here up and over 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 inches of rain potentially locally in some of these areas. And it's not just a few spots. It's spread out through the Carolinas, into Virginia, over into West Virginia, and even the Mid-Atlantic and parts of New England could get in on some of this tropical moisture as it continues to lift north. That being said, with all that rain over a rather short amount of time, we're looking at the flash flood risk here. The Weather Prediction Center does put a 4-tiered system when it gauges the threat for flash flooding, and this is at a 3 out of 4. So relatively high and spread out over a large area. In fact, the majority of the state of North Carolina and South Carolina are at that level 3 threat through the day today. I talked about that secondary wave. There it is, 60% chance of developing within the next 5 days. It just recently pushed off the coast of Africa. It doesn't look like much, very disheveled here on infrared satellite imagery, but there is a broad spin with this, and it is building off to the west-northwest, so we'll see what happens here over the coming days. But if it was to come towards land, we've got a good 12 to 14 days to watch it. That's the average time systems in that position take to get to the United States, if that's how the models play with things. But until then, that's the latest there on Ian making its last landfall of its lifetime. Thankfully, we're done with it after this, but it will rain out. That tornado risk as well as the storm surge risk ongoing through this afternoon. Until next time, you can find me on social media, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, and on TikTok at TimTalkWeather.